Today's lesson is 14.1, distance in the coordinate plane, and you're going to see some familiar things from our previous lessons today. And our focus is, and our essential question, how can you use the absolute value to find the distance between 2 points with the same x or y coordinates? All right, so if you remember our previous lesson, this was our x coordinate, this is our y coordinate. And today we're going to be looking at a concept which is known as absolute value, which is the distance from a number to 0. So let's just take a look at it for a second. All right, so our x coordinate was 3. So the absolute value, and this is how you write absolute value now, all right, you put the number inside two lines like this, and now that's the distance from, if you think of a number line, right, 0 and the number, all right, so that is a distance of 3, all right, so the absolute value of 3 is 3, right, seems pretty straightforward, right, but now the second point is going to make a little bit more sense, all right, so -2, so if I'm using the same number line, right, -2 is on the left of 0, okay, so the absolute value now of -2 is the distance from 0 to 2, and so that is a positive number. So an absolute value is always going to be positive for every number, all right? So if it's a negative number, it's just the distance from 0 to the number. Hopefully that makes sense at all. You'll see it in practice here in just a second. All right, so we are going to practice this now based off of our concepts, and for this first part, this is a little experiment you guys could do at home. You're going to take a point and you're going to reflect it across both axes that we've been looking at, the y and the x, all right? So Go Math talks about using a piece of paper to think of folding your grid like a piece of paper in half, all right? That'll make sense in just a second, so let's do that first. Let's take our starting point. Let's graph this. All right, so what does this mean? This is my x coordinate, and this is my y coordinate. All right, so the first one is across, the second one is up and down. So I'm going to start again at 0. I'm going to go over 3, and now I'm going to go down 2 because it's negative, and that is my point. All right, so now pretend that I reflected over the y-axis. All right, so I'm folding my piece of paper this way. So now this point is going to be reflected like a mirror on the other side. It's kind of like a line of symmetry, if you remember that lesson on previous years. All right, so my y value now is going to stay the same, but my x is going to change, and this is where the absolute value comes in. All right, so we're going to take the absolute value of my across number, which is 3. So what's the absolute value to get to 0? That's 3. And now I'm going to go 3 in the opposite side. All right, and that's going to bring me to -3. All right, so it's going to be -3, -2. So there's my point. Okay, so my point across the y-axis is -3, -2. And now pretend I'm going to do this across the x-axis. All right, so let's do that. All right, so starting point again was over 3, -2. And now I'm going to go across the x-axis. So it's like folding a piece of paper this way, that line of symmetry going this way. All right, so let's find my absolute value to get to 0. It's 2 units right, and now I'm going to go 2 units the other direction, up. All right, and there's going to be my next point. All right, so some of you guys can see that right away. I'm sure it's over 3, up 2, but if you can't, start at 0 and then go across and then go up. All right, so my new point is going to be 3, 2. All right, so that is the concepts here, and this is the example that they give you. All right, what is the distance between A and B? All right, so let's just I'm going to make that over here so you guys can see it a little bit easier. All right, and then B was over 4, -2. All right, so what's my distance? All right, so down here they're talking about absolute values. All right, so notice that my across digit is going to be the same, so I'm only going to focus on the y's. All right, so what am I going to do? I'm going to take the absolute value of 3, and I'm going to add it now to the absolute value of my second number, which was -2. Okay, so I can rewrite it down below. What's the absolute value of 3? 3, plus what's the absolute value of -2, which is 2, and it's a distance of 5. And now you guys can, you could count down if you wanted to. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. All right, so it's 3 and 2, and so that's how you get to 5 units. Okay, so that's practicing the strategy here. Down below, points D and C. You can see D is there, C is there. It's going from -5 to -4, or -1, excuse me. All right, it's over here. And so now we're going to see the distance. You can count it, 1, 2, 3, 4. And so the absolute values, since it's in the same quadrant, all right, you would subtract the two absolute values, which would be absolute value of -5 minus the absolute value of -1. That gets you a distance of 4. All right, so let's look at some more examples. Find the distance between each pair. So I'm going to graph these. E is -4, 7. All right, so I'm going to go over 4 to the negative side. I start at 0, and now I go up 7. It's at the very top. Okay, and that is going to be point E. Point F is going to be over 5, up 7. Starting at 0 again, over 5, up 7. So notice that my y-coordinate is the same for both of these, right? So I can use only the x for my distance, all right? So that's one way to look at it. And so since I'm going across the axis now, I can use my absolute values and I can add them. All right, so I'm going across, right? So what's the absolute value of -4 is 4. What's the absolute value of 5 is 5. And so the distance is 9. And I can show that up here, right, by going this way. That's a distance of 4. And then going this way, this is a distance of 5. All right, so putting those two together, there's my 9. All right. Let's look at the next one. All right, so this one, my x-coordinate is going to be the same, and my y-coordinate is going to be different. All right, so I'm going to set this up, -10. And based off of my grid, it's going to be a little bit off the grid. So over 0, I start at 0 right, down -5, so I'm here. And over 0, down -10, which would, if I continue my scale, right, it would be here. Going to do different colors so you guys can see it. All right, so this one is not going across the axis. All right, so I can just subtract my absolute values if I wanted to. All right, so what's the absolute value of -5? What's the absolute value of -10 is 10. So now I just subtract the to 2, and you guys can just count, right? The distance between is 5. So that's how you do it. All right, so remember when you're staying in the same quadrant, all right, you don't have to add the absolute values. That's only when you're reflecting across the axis, all right, or you can just count using your finger. All right, this is the other type of problem you're going to see. All right, so point A is across. Let's plot it across the axis, all right, that we're looking at. So let's find our axis first. So there's A, right? So my point is, I'm going to rewrite it. My first coordinate is over 3 up 2. All right, so now I'm going to go across the x-axis, and so it's important for you guys to remember which one is the x. So now I'm going this way. All right, so my x is going to stay the same, all right, and now my up and down is going to change. All right, so what's my absolute value here? I'm going from 2 to 0, so that's an absolute value of 2. I'm going to go to the opposite direction. All right, so my distance is 4, but that's not what they're asking me. They're asking me what it becomes, so it's going to be -2 on the y coordinate. All right, so I am going from 2 to -2. Because I'm going over the y-axis. All right, so there's my answer. All right, let's look at the next one. Let's plot point B across the y-axis. All right, so I'm going to first of all write what my plot is. So let's look at B. B is over 5 to the negative side, and it is down to -2. So there I am. So I'm going across the y-axis, so I'm going over this way. Okay? And so now that means my y is going to stay the same, right? Because it's on y equals 2 right here. And now only my x is going to change. And I'm sure some of you guys are noticing right away that it's just going to become positive on the other side because I'm going over like a mirror, all right? And that comes from absolute value. So it's 5 over here and then 5 over the other direction, all right? So it's a distance of 10. Hopefully you're saying to yourself, and my new point is 5, 2. All right, so this is going to be your assignment. You're going to be doing all these different parts. Again, I want you to do it on Jamboard so I can go in and I can circle and I can draw arrows if I see people having any confusion. It's a lot easier for me to grasp. So notice all the things we just did in the video are here. So first of all, find point A and do it across the x-axis. All right, so x-axis is going this way. Y-axis would be going the other way. All right, so you got to find the starting point and then do it across the correct axis. That's for the first part. All right, so this one down here, you're going to be doing both. All right, so find your starting point over 4, 1. That would be here, okay? And now what happens if I do it across the x, and what happens if I do it across the y? What is changing on each? All right, so that's the next part. And then lastly, it's finding the distance in between the points, all right? So absolute value is here, so we're going to be subtracting, right, distance apart. And then you would add the absolute values when you go across an axis going from one quadrant to the next, okay? So you see that there. What's another one that you would be adding the absolute values? That would be going here, right? So you're going from G to here, and then from the axis to E. These ones here, you would just subtract absolute values, okay? And so just find your right starting point and then subtract accordingly. All right, so any questions, let me know. Pretty straightforward. But again, get used to the whole idea of absolute values again, because this is going to help you a lot when we start looking at positive and negative numbers later on this year, especially in 7th grade math.